Hey, with you evening story channel, I post new interesting stories every day. Subscribe and click the bell to not miss it. Camille put her head down on her hands tiredly. The endless workdays fetched like gum, and there was still duty ahead. Another sleepless night. From the open window of the resident's room came the smell of asphalt heated by the hot summer day, slightly diluted by the fresh scent of water. The river was not far away, just a block from the hospital. Ah, I wish it were. Camille now quickly changed and run to the river. At least just sit on a bench admiring the water. And even better to go down to the beach and plunge into the cool waves. But the girl couldn't do any of that. For 3 months now she had been working simply to exhaustion, dialing her duty to the max. Since Stephen had lost his job, there was no other way to survive. They had a young son and a decent mortgage to pay. Camille lifted her head and rubbed her tired eyes. Why were they so unlucky? Ever since they got a new head doctor at their hospital. No one has a normal life. Although initially Camille seemed to think that Christopher was treating her well. He often joked with her and complimented her. In fact, the head doctor had his eye on a young, beautiful employee. Luxurious brown braid, big brown eyes, juicy lips, and almost perfect figure. Of course, the lover of women Christopher just could not pass by. He made Camille an unequivocal proposal and was very annoyed by her indignant refusal. This was almost the first time he had encountered such a thing. After all, it should be clear to everyone that it is better to be friends with the bosses. Christopher was not going to give up. One evening, he found Camille alone in the resident's room and grabbed her and tried to kiss her. The girl desperately pulled away. She was disgusted by this insolent Don Juan with greasy eyes. Fortunately, her husband Stephen, who was also a surgeon at their hospital, looked in on the resident. He immediately realized everything, quickly pulled the head doctor away from his wife, and violently punched him in the face. It turned out that Stephen had broken the chief's nose. Of course, Christopher could not forgive such a humiliation. The very next day, he ordered Stephen to write a letter of resignation. It was useless to prove anything. The head doctor had his hands full. It was a real disaster for their family. There was only one hospital in their town, and Stephen had nowhere to go to work after he was fired. He had to take a job as a security guard at a supermarket. But money was still desperately short, and Camille realized she was hanging on by a thread. The head doctor didn't bother her anymore, but he was always nagging and harassing her. Camille, why are we sleeping? We're sitting up. There was a familiar, nasty voice in her ear. Am I dozing off? Camille thought. You're going to operate. On who? Camille was surprised. She was still a young specialist and mostly assisted in operations. Of course, sometimes she operated on her own, but they were always simple plant operations, like appendicitis removal, and no one ever did them in the evening. There was a man brought in by ambulance with a stab wound. Deep wound, probably liver damage. Lost a lot of blood, but me. Where's John? He's on duty today, too. Camille asked, confused. What are you going to tell me who to put on the operation? Overhead, asked the chief physician. Don't worry, you're a bum. Just for you go and train. Christopher laughed. Camille sighed. It all makes sense, she thought. John has no desire to operate on a bum. Camille stood up resolutely and adjusted her uniform cap. It didn't matter to her whether it was a bum or the president himself. The girl was one of those doctors who entered the profession by vocation and honored the Hippocratic Oath. The victim was still lying on the gurney in the emergency room. He was a large elderly man with graying hair, barefoot in shorts and a dirty, vomit-stained t-shirt. His breathing was barely audible. Why is the patient still here? Sternly said the nurse. Quickly prepare for surgery, nurse, is one of those close to the head doctor. Camille sneered behind Camille's back. The operation was very complicated and lasted almost 4 hours. The man lost a really big amount of blood. It was good that they had the right blood and were able to do a transfusion. However, The patient was very weak. He almost went into cardiac arrest once, but luckily it was not. Standing at the operating table, Camille never felt nervous or tired. Her hands felt the patient, and the surgeon acted with confidence and clarity. Finally, the surgery was over. Camille was washing her hands when Camille's assistant and anesthesiologist approached her. "Wow, you literally pulled him out of the grave," said one of the colleagues admiringly. "I do not understand why the chief does not put you on complex operations," added another. "Yes, of course, everyone knows and you don't," Camille thought. But she wasn't angry at all. After all, few people would want to be in open conflict with management. "Okay, guys, thanks, everyone. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna try to get some sleep. There's still time before the end of the shift." In the morning, Camille was pleased to see that her patient was doing well. If he continues to do well, he'll be moved from the ICU to a regular room by evening. He'll be in the hospital for a long time. Probably no relatives. That's a shame. It's not good to be alone. That's what Camille thought. On the way home, she almost fell asleep on the bus, even though it was only 4 stops away. Stephen was already going to work. He had the afternoon shift today. 5-year-old Robert was still sleeping sweetly. It was Saturday, so he didn't have to go to daycare. Stephen tenderly hugged his wife, who was half dead from fatigue. "Stephen, I saved a man today," smiled Camille. "Honey, you'll tell me. In the evening I have to run already. Go get some rest. Maybe Robert will let you get a couple hours of rest." "Stephen, we don't see each other at all with these jobs of ours," Camille said sadly. Her husband's face immediately darkened. "Yeah, what's my job?" "It's just a title, guarding sausage and tomatoes." "Great. A certified doctor with experience." "Bitter." He grinned. "And almost no money." "That's the kind of loser of a husband you have. Stephen, you're the best, and it's not your fault." That much is clear. Camille already regretted having started this conversation. She knew how sensitive Stephen was about his work situation. She kissed her husband and closed the door behind him. Camille quickly washed her face, collapsed on the sofa, and fell into a heavy sleep. A few hours later, Camille was already preparing breakfast for herself and her son, pouring sugar into the teacups. The woman noticed that her hands were trembling from fatigue. "I wonder how much longer I can keep up this regimen," thought she sadly. Suddenly, the phone rang. Camille looked at the screen. It was the receptionist in charge calling. Immediately, she had a bad feeling not to answer the phone or what. It was her official day off. No, she wouldn't do that either. She wouldn't answer. And then all day long, she'll be tormented by guesswork. "Go ahead." "Camille, Christopher is calling you to the hospital," the chief physician's secretary said excitedly in the phone. "What's wrong?" "I just got off duty." "Oh, it's about your surgery." "Let's in general hurry up," and the woman hung up. Camille felt a chill inside. Had her patient from yesterday taken a turn for the worse? But how? He was fine this morning. How could it be, poor man? He must have died otherwise. And most importantly, he wouldn't have made a fuss over some homeless guy like he said. He doesn't care about the sick man now, but he found a good reason to fire me or blackmail me. Camille almost cried, but she had to pack and go to the hospital. Her husband's parents were at the cottage, and Mom and Dad lived in another town. So Robert had to be left with a neighbor. In 45 minutes, a pale, worried Camille was already entering the office of the head doctor. The head doctor was not alone in the office. Opposite him sat a well-groomed woman of about 45 in a light-colored lined suit. Camille smiled, and the chief smiled at the sight of Camille. "Come in. Have a seat. This is Emily. Meet our Camille." Camille couldn't understand who this woman was or what had happened to Christopher. "Hello, Camille." The woman extended her hand. "My name is Emily, and I really want to thank you for my father. Yesterday, you saved the life of Kevin." Camille slumped down in the chair. The academician Kevin, the same famous neurologist, winner of many awards, author of scientific works, the same one whose textbook she studied at university. But as yesterday's patient in no way resembled the academician whom Camille remembered from the photos on the books. Surprised, Emily smiled. I can imagine. I was shocked myself when I called the hospital in the morning and was able to identify my father by the large birthmark on his back. I knew he was in this town, and I started to worry when my dad stopped contacting me. Yes, we all know that Mr. Kevin is from our town, said the head doctor, smiling flatteringly. Maybe we shouldn't have coffee after all. Cold, said Emily, without looking at the owner of the office. So, Camille, I had a chance to talk to some of the staff. I know what condition my father was in, and I know that you literally pulled him from the dead. And you did it without knowing who was in front of you. Thank you. Believe me, you have done a great thing not only for our family, but for the whole world medicine. Dad's still working. You're welcome. Camille replied with embarrassment. I was just doing my job. It doesn't matter to me who the patient is. All that matters is their health. Yes, Emily, we did everything we could to save Kevin. The chief of medicine inserted his inappropriate opinion again. Yeah, Christopher, I've heard that. I'm telling you, I've talked to the staff. I know my father was in the emergency room for half an hour. You thought he was homeless, didn't you? So you chose the worst surgeon for the operation. Except Camille was the best. By the way, Christopher, have you ever heard that the most important thing for a doctor is humanity? But it wasn't like that, the head doctor said uncertainly, not paying attention to him. Emily said to Camille, let's get out of here and talk in a calmer atmosphere. Soon they were already sitting in a cozy cafe on the waterfront. Emily told Camille that her father loved his hometown and often came here to fish. His childhood friends, simple laborers, stayed here. But it was with them that my father rested his soul. Of course, when they met, they had a drink. But Kevin never got drunk. And yesterday, when he was drunk on his way back from fishing, he was attacked in a deserted place by some scumbags. They've already been apprehended, by the way. According to these scumbags, the elderly man tried to defend himself and they stabbed him. Stole his watch, wallet, expensive spinning rod. They even took his sneakers and left him bleeding. It's good that my dad was found relatively quickly by passersby and called an ambulance. And most importantly, it was very lucky that you, Camille, was on duty that night. Otherwise, Dad wouldn't be alive, Emily concluded, wiping away her tears. Camille, tell me about yourself. How do you work? How's life? Kevin asked. And Camille didn't realize how she had told her everything about her husband, about the behavior of the head doctor, about the mortgage, and about her little son. How is your husband a doctor too? He's also a heart surgeon. I'd like to meet him, Emily exclaimed. He's not fit to be a security guard because of that bastard. Your boss, Camille, you may know that I'm the chief physician of the Metropolitan Art Institute. I'm always in need of good staff. Our salaries are decent. Emily, of course. Thank you. Stephen will call you today, Camille said cheerfully, and you, Camille. I'm looking for a good place in the Metropolitan Clinic in your qualifications. I'm sure you've had enough of burying yourself in this shithole. Thank you. I'm believing her happiness, said Camille. Within a year, Camille and Stephen were already firmly established in the capital. Stephen had an excellent record at the Heart Institute, and Camille worked at the hospital, where she was entrusted with complex operations. Robert went to a private kindergarten with English, various clubs, and a swimming pool. They sold their apartment and recently bought a 3-room apartment in the capital. Of course, for her also still had to pay the mortgage, but the young people looked confidently into the future. They were very friendly with Kevin's family and often went to their dacha on weekends. Academician loved Camille almost as his own daughter, but at Christopher, everything was not so good. How angry was he that he entrusted Camille to operate on Kevin? Now this upstart was taken to the capital with her psychopathic husband. After a month, the head doctor began to calm down. But then an inspection from the ministry itself came to the hospital. It was organized with the easy hand of Kevin. The inspection revealed a huge number of violations, and he was suspended from work. And then Christopher began to have a serious heart condition. His heart had to go to the Capitals Institute, because it was there that the best cardiologists work. That's where Stephen met him. Christopher looked terribly pale, bent over with bags under his eyes. Stephen was on his way to the operating room with his team. How pathetic the former all-powerful head surgeon looked in comparison. He was scheduled for surgery. Stephen told his wife tonight, "I hope I'm not the one operating on him. I know one thing, if it's you, he'll be very lucky." Camille smiled affectionately and kissed her husband.